Welcome, everyone, to episode 172 of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jared the Man Hornbeck, head of podcasts, and I am coming to you from the Z-Core building, which is located here in Brooklyn, New York. But you know what? I am not the only person who is crawling around this underfurnished house like a cat. No, who else is here with me?
Well, it's me, Steve Guntley, and hey, you're no sicko. You're my bobcat. This is the podcast about stinky juice, scab eating, and jugs full of horse laxative. That's because this is the podcast about Deadly End, aka Neighborhood Watch, a truly nasty little bit of business here. One of the more obscure and certainly the most extreme movie that we've covered on this podcast. Would you say that's fair?
I think in some ways, I do think we've definitely dealt with gorier scenes. We've dealt with like bigger, more outwardly violent, with more, with more people dying, more casualties, things like that. But there is an unpleasantness to this one that I think might be unmatched, which I think is all intentional. So
very much so. Very much so.
We'll get into it. All right.
It was a great movie to unearth, and we have our guest today to thank for picking this movie and kind of helping us locate it. This is one that we had to track down, and he just so happens to be someone with a history of writing about this movie, so he'll be able to give some insight, I hope. Special guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Michael Gingold from Fangoria, Rue Morgue, the Ad Nauseum books, and I also work on Delirium, which is Charles Band's magazine.
Amazing. Always great to have you on the show. You're certainly... in my mind, one of the most educated people on the subject of B-movie horror, just like period. So it's always exciting to get the chance to pick your brain a little bit.
I'm glad to be able to be talking about this movie, which I don't think a lot of people know about.
No.
The Lunatic Releasing, as it was called, DVD, is long out of print. I found out that Charles Band's company no longer has the rights to it, and I don't know who does. It's kind of floating around out there. Hopefully someone will pick it up. Maybe someone who's listening to this podcast.
Yeah. I'm sure you can probably find it. I was a little curious about your history with this movie. We were able to find a interview that you did with the director of this movie for Fangoria back in, 2008? Like, it was back when the DVD of this was first released. But this movie had already been on your radar for a while when that came out.
Yeah, well, this movie, it played a whole bunch of festivals, including the Fantasia International Film Festival, where, according to the lore that's online, during the movie, somebody either fainted or had a seizure or some sort of medical issue, and Stuart Gordon was there. He was presenting, I think, Edmund at the festival, and they had to call a doctor to come in and give this person medical attention. And Stuart Gordon saw this and said, "Oh my God, this is a movie with some impact." And it was he who, because I think the movie had been looking for distribution for a little while.
It had, yeah.
Playing a lot of festivals, was just not finding it. And at that point, Stuart Gordon went to Charles Band and said, "Look, this movie made somebody have a seizure or faint or something. You need to pick this up."
And I think that's one of the stranger parts about this whole journey. And this is a movie I'm very fascinated to get into this one. There's a lot of meat to talk about on this bone. Yeah. But it's fascinating that Charlie chose to release this one, because listeners of our show and people who've been following along and watching these movies with us know that Full Moon is not extreme horror. Often it's more cartoony. It's more there's gore, but they're not stomach churning gore. It's not sexual violence or really kind of ugly stuff that they dig into. They're going for kind of classical Universal Studios meets Roger Corman kind of popcorny sort of horror. And this feels a very different flavor than something that Charles Band usually associates with.
Yeah, it's that's why I think I read that the deal was that Charlie would release it uncut, unrated. However, he would not do it under the Full Moon banner because it was much more extreme. So he created Lunatic Releasing, much like De Laurentiis Entertainment Group invented Rosebud Releasing to release Evil Dead 2, or 20th Century Fox came up with International Classics to release Suspiria. As far as I know, it's the only Lunatic Releasing title.
It sure is.
Movies came out under that banner. So this this movie had a label all to itself.
They sought mental health advice, and they were treated, and there's no need for the lunatic label anymore.
So this movie has the misfortune of, at least in terms of our spreadsheet and Charles Band's IMDb, of falling right in this period of like 2004, 2005, 2006, where a lot of the releases, when we look back to kind of make sure we have everything, and it's like, all right, well, are we covering everything in the filmography? What's this one? What's this one? There are a lot of movies with very general, vague names like Horrific and Devil Dolls and stuff like that, which aren't even really movies. They're just compilations of 20 to 30 minutes of an already released movie that we've already covered together. And they're in the filmography. So I was weeding through them and taking them out of our spreadsheet. Like, there's no reason to cover Horrific or anything like that if we've already done all of the movies. It's silly, and it does. It took a few out, but Deadly End was one where I had to look into, and I was like, all right, so it's hard to tell just from the poster art that was on IMDb. Is this a real movie? Is this a compilation movie? Like, what exactly is this? Oh, it's also known as Neighborhood Watch. And it stood out to me a little bit because I kept thinking, all right, I don't know the legitimacy of this movie. I don't know if this is going to be archival footage of something we've already watched.
Yeah.
And then Mike, I saw you out and we were talking about, movies for your return to the show, what's out there. And you mentioned this movie, and I was so thankful that you did, because it did one of two things. It gave us something that wasn't, obvious on the spreadsheet. And I think you've done a good job of that too. I mean, without you, maybe we would have still been putting off watching Cinderella and Fairy Tales. But the other thing was that it kind of eased my mind that not only was it actually a movie, but that there would be something to talk about. And boy, is there something to talk about, because I did not know what this movie was until all it was a title with an alias in a spreadsheet. Until you mentioned it. And I was like, okay, well, there's got to be something there then. If he's picking this movie, like, it's not just your kind of throwaway early 2000, early shot on video full moon movie. And I don't think anything in the world could have prepared me for what this movie actually was.
Very, very true. Let's learn a little bit. We've gotten some of it, but let's learn a little bit about the very strange production of this very strange movie, Deadly End, aka Neighborhood Watch. I think the better title. Can we all agree? Better title.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that the title only works if you look at the poster.
Yeah.
The poster is like a dead end sign, only it says Deadly End, and it's like, okay, it tells you this is about suburbia and bad things are happening. But if you hear or look at that title without that image, it doesn't really tell you much. If anything, kind of coming from full moon around that time, it almost seems like, someone's ass or something, like a Deadly End.
Yeah, literally. This could have been the butt with teeth movie. Like, this could have been that we've all been clamoring for.
The cartoon, the zombie ass, the Japanese film. But
exactly,
you get it when you see the poster. You get that title. I mean, Neighborhood Watch is such a better title. And I'm still not exactly sure why they changed it, because it really does speak to I think we should probably talk a bit first about what this movie is about for the people who don't know it, and what it is about it.
Maybe we can give like a bit of a content warning, like right up the top.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking about a lot of pretty extreme stuff today. We're going to be talking about a lot of bodily fluids. We're going to be talking about a lot of excrement, a lot of organs, a lot of guts, a lot of blood. And we're just going to be talking about a movie that has a really icky and uncomfortable vibe to it. And I just know that, like, even hardened horror fans out there are some movies that really kind of like don't really work with your aesthetic and aren't really your thing. So just kind of a content warning that we're going to be getting gross stuff. But this is about a young couple who moves into this like really shitty looking suburban neighborhood so that he could start this new job at this big faceless corporation. And almost immediately they start being stalked, harassed, and assaulted by their deeply, 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 deeply unhinged neighbor across the street, who is played by character actor Nick Searcy, who I'm seeing here in my notes is a normal guy with normal opinions and normal politics, giving a truly outstanding performance in this movie. I do have to say, like, a really committed performance.
Steve, and this could go to Mike too. Were you a Justified fan?
You know, I've never seen it.
I had not either, but I know that's one of the things he's best known for.
Yeah, he's really good on Justified, and he plays a pretty major role on the show.
I knew him from Castaway, where he's essentially like third build in the movie Castaway for 2 scenes with playing Tom Hanks' best friend. But and so that's kind of things just sort of escalate from there. There are efforts to fight back against him, but he kind of runs this little cul-de-sac like a tyrant, and everybody's afraid to stand up to him. And it just leads to this deeply bizarre and unsettling finale.
Well, okay, you are correct in that plot synopsis, Steve, but I do have to say, I think one of the things that really works about this movie is that he is not the only threat. Every person who they encounter, basically, it seems like a threat to them. Like, to the point where, like, the receptionist in the Z-Corps building, to the woman who's his colleague who's walking him around, who later takes him into a priceless heirloom room. There's a lot of strangeness there. To maybe the most off-putting city worker, gas Con Edison person you'll ever meet in your life.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him. He just kind of comes in, is gross for a scene, and then leaves the movie. Great.
And we should also note, you say, he assaults them. This character Adrian doesn't assault them directly. He actually kind of comes on like he's welcoming them, and at one point he brings them a big box of chocolates as a welcoming gift. And what they don't know is that this guy is obsessed with bodily functions and how they can be altered and damaged and poisoned. And he kind of goes on this campaign to slowly but surely poison this young couple in their own home in a way that they don't know exactly what's going on. He doesn't do anything, at least for a little while, outwardly weird or threatening. So they really don't know that he is actually has this whole campaign that he's waging against them.
It takes a while for him to kind of emerge, and then and the way that he is getting at them is through this kind of humiliating, ritual of poisoning them. There's a disturbing scene early on where he gives her a bouquet that turns out to be entirely poison oak. So when she stuck her face in to smell it, her face just breaks out in this horrible looking itchy rash, and then that's just like the first assault. That's the very first little thing, and things just escalate from there.
Where does this land in the Mount Rushmore of off-putting character introductions? Because the first scene with Adrian, he is laying on the floor of his dirt house. He is picking scabs from his abdomen and eating them. Mm-hmm. And he has 2, like, what do they have? Like $50 or silver dollars over his eyes. It is memorable.
And he has this constant soundtrack going on in his house of like this incredibly far right-wing evangelical preacher who's talking about the sins of sexuality and like how all women are whores and everything like that. He's just like listening to this horrible droning propaganda.
Yeah, he's friends with Maxine's dad.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he's coming from that world.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit about where this movie came from before we kind of get into some of the grosser details here. The writer and director is a guy named Graham Whiffler, who is a very, very interesting figure. Whiffler came from the music video world, and he was kind of the go-to guy for like the most eclectic kind of art bands that were sort of on the fringe of the music scene in the 80s, and some of which like crossed over into the mainstream. So I'm talking like Sparks, Tuxedo Moon, Oingo Boingo was a big one, and The Residents is the one that he spent the most time with. So he's working with all these like great art pop bands. Obviously, The Resident or Oingo Boingo goes on to be like a huge success, and Danny Elfman becomes a major composer. But he was also an aspiring filmmaker. In 1989, he sold his first script for a deeply, deeply odd movie called Sonny Boy. It stars Paul L. Smith, Brad Dourif, and David Carradine giving a drag performance that's never commented on. A really strange kind of like greaser coming of age movie of sorts that is also just like this. It's completely incomprehensible. It's been chopped all to bits. Yeah.
It's a weird Southwestern noir film. They actually put a print at the 24-hour film festival or horror festival that Exhumed Films does every year, and it just took everyone by surprise. It's so weird. And again, David Carradine appears in drag in the entire movie, and it's never quite established. Are we supposed to see him as a drag guy, or is he just playing a woman? Did they just cast David Carradine as a woman? It's really strange. And not as strange, however, as it was going to be. Whiffler told me it was going to be even weirder and even more perverse, and it was actually toned down in the final film version from his original vision for it.
And Whiffler, I'm curious to kind of hear about your experience, like meeting with him and talking to him, because he seems like a really interesting, really intense guy. He does not mince words about the producer of Sonny Boy.
No, he doesn't.
I believe he calls him a gigolo, like literally a gigolo, who said that he was seducing his quote was, I think, an extremely fat, ugly woman in order to finance the movie. Like, he is not shy about this. And apparently he thought it was the director who had kind of like butchered this movie. And that wasn't the case. A few years later, he and the director connected, said, no, like literally, this was the producer. He took it out of my hands. I was trying to contact you, but they told me they'd sue me if I did.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that exact quote here. I'm just looking this up. Well, he says he got the inspiration. He said he lived right across the street from a biker house, and Paul L. Smith's character is like involved with a biker gang. That's a major part of the story also. And allegedly, the basic premise is based on a true story. In the movie, this couple is murdered, and their little baby is kidnapped by Paul Smith's character, who raises him as his own. And that apparently was based on a real crime case that Whiffler had heard about.
Oh, yikes. I mean, he would do the same thing with Neighborhood Watch, as we'll get to in a minute. But already out the gate, his first experience with Hollywood is not going great. And then he sells another script in 1992, and this one to Universal. And this is going to be a movie called Dr. Giggles, which is, I think it kind of emerged as like a cult favorite. It was pretty dismissed at the time. I think it's one of those movies that like made money, but only because it cost like next to nothing. And you're the star of your movie is Larry Drake from LA Law. Like, this is not a marquee idol necessarily. Dr. Giggles, it's never been one of my movies. It's fun. It's pretty goofy.
I believe you mean Larry Drake of Dark Knight of the Scarecrow fame.
No, yes. Excuse me. Oh, I thought you were going to say Dark Man, but yeah, Dark Man.
Well, that too.
Yeah, well, he's Durant. He returns. We were all waiting for the return of Durant.
Yeah, I cannot say I'm a fan of Dr. Giggles, and it actually was not a success at all when it came out. It came out right after Candyman, and Candyman kind of wiped the floor with it at the box office. But that script was originally, and first of all, to correct something, as usual, Wikipedia is wrong about. It says that Dr. Giggles is based on a comic book. It was produced by Dark Horse Films, which was an offshoot of Dark Horse Comics. They did put out a comic adaptation, but it was a Graham Whiffler spec script first. That was originally sold to New Line. And I'm going to try to find the quote here that he said about when it was at New Line. He said, New Line had it, and I went into the first meeting, and the head of development, this little old biddy woman, said, the first thing I want to tell you, Graham, is as long as I'm involved with New Line, we're not going to make a movie with anybody picking at their scabs.
Yes.
So then it went over to Universal, and it was called Mr. Giggles at the time. I don't know if it even had the doctor motif that it had, because Manny Cotto, the director, completely rewrote it. And then when it got completely turned into this kind of generic teen slasher movie, he basically took a bunch of the ideas about this character that he had for Mr. Giggles and put them into Adrian in Neighborhood Watch. So Neighborhood Watch was kind of like, if I had done Mr. Giggles, this is what it would have looked like.
Right. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. And I think, I believe it was you speculating in your article that's maybe his experience working within the Hollywood system was sort of informing the attitude and sort of the energy that he was bringing to his next script, which is Neighborhood Watch, which again was taking some inspiration from real life. There were two different cases that he had read about, like several years apart, but he combined them together to basically make this one guy who's just a just this how to describe him. Yeah, I don't know. I'll get back around to him, but yeah, they're combining it into this one case of this bully who's like assaulting and harassing and sort of like holding court over this tiny little washed up neighborhood. And he tried for years to get this made, but he completed the draft back in 1995. So this one has been circling around for a while. But yeah, like you said, New Line did not want to publish the movie about the scab eating guy, and really nobody did. And it's kind of worth noting that the atmosphere in horror in the mid 90s was so antithetical to this movie's entire spirit. The 90s were not when we were really trying to like gross people out or sick people out. The 90s, you know, Scream broke out the way it did for a reason. We were getting more hipster ironic about our horror, and we were getting less, it was less about trying to push the boundaries like you did in the 70s. It was more about playing around with the tropes.
Well, yeah, I mean, now we had entered a meta phase of where it was we were operating and trying to be a successful film, but also very much making references and being aware to things that came before it. And I think this does not have that feel to it at all. This is more so, I think, than anything we've covered on the show, very indicative of just like the true feeling of potential human depravity. Like that was a word I kept thinking of, was depravity, which I feel like we haven't had to say a lot on the show because, you know, just the nature of, I don't know, like you mentioned before, Steve, where, you know, some of this full moon stuff is silly and there's little tiny terrors running around. And here, this is not, I do want to give a shout out. I believe Graham Whiffler said that the art director or someone in the set dressing department was his brother.
Okay, yeah.
And I have to say, like, this is a movie that is low budget, obviously.
Yeah.
But incredibly intentional in the way it fills its space. Like these sets, and I have not seen, this couple lives in the most Lynchian house I have ever seen outside of a David Lynch movie. Like there is just this heinous looking carpet with like just a few kind of dark spots where you could tell it needs to be cleaned. They're still kind of living out of boxes, but it isn't even the not being unpacked part. It's like their bed is a mattress on the floor with two boxes as nightstands, one of them with just a metal lamp clipped to the side of it. It's so sparse and so like no human beings would live the way they live. Like even if you just moved into a house.
This is a movie that has a film over it. This is a movie that is so grimy that you can feel it on your skin, and that's a really impressive accomplishment for this, which must have been like, I mean, it must have been very, very, very cheap to make this. This is like, is it shot on video? It looks like it was shot on like early mid 90s or mid 2000s video.
I'm not sure. I don't know whether, I mean, I know when I saw it projected, it looked like film, but again, that was a long time ago and it was hard to tell.
I don't always have the best eye for that, but yeah.
One thing about the production design, Whiffler told me a story that, well, first of all, okay, so his brother, the production designer, discovered this town called Victorville, California, which is where they made the movie, because he was internet dating, and he wound up going out with this woman who lived in Victorville, which was like 80 miles away from him. So he went out to this town, and it was basically built, I think back in the like 1970s or 80s, near a military base in the middle of nowhere, with the idea that it would generate like, you know, more of a community and more of a city around it. And it never did. It just kind of like sat there and now it's this awful kind of decaying place. And if you see Adrian's house, which is, if you think the couple's house looked bad, this place is just horrifying. And apparently they put a lot of the religious icons in there.
Yeah.
But like this horrible carpet, like he describes it as a green shag carpet that had turned brown. And, and the owners allowed them to like cut down walls for what they wanted to do with it and everything. That some people had just moved out, but the owner, said you can go in there and do whatever to it. And they turned it into this completely disgusting lair. And they also said that the townspeople were friendly to the production and helped them out, but it was just this really weird, like isolated community that had this bizarre veneer to it. And you really feel that when you watch the movie.
It was reminding me a lot of the suburban Detroit neighborhoods of Barbarian. And that's kind of what Victorville was at. That's where Victorville was at around this time. I think Victorville as a city is kind of like on the come up, but that was a city that was famously plagued with some like financial and residential problems, like some major issues.
That's a pretty good pull. I was thinking it reminded me a lot of like a Breaking Bad Albuquerque meth house.
Yeah, kind of like that. It all feels, we all have seen these neighborhoods. We all know these neighborhoods where it's like, okay, yeah, they've got houses and they've got lawns and they've got fences, but like it feels unsafe to be here. It feels like there are ticks on everything. And that, and from looking at the people in this movie, one thing that just is always going to unsettle me anytime in a movie is when characters just have skin lesions. And everybody in this movie just looks terrible. They are breaking out constantly. They are seeping and oozing, and they've got dark bags under their eyes. Everybody looks sleep deprived and sick and crazy.
A funny anecdote. Michael, you could probably tell me, who is it besides Nick Searcy and Graham Whiffler who's on the audio commentary on the DVD?
Oh, I'd have to look that up.
So there's another person on the commentary who I forget if it was one of the actors or just someone who was from an outlet doing something. But there's a great moment where they're talking about the makeup on people.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you made everyone look so like gaunt and all this stuff. And he's like, and like and then it was the scene where the gas man is like in the house and they're like, and the makeup that you did on this guy, and Graham Whiffler's like, no, there's no makeup on that guy.
Oh,
That's
really?
just the way he looks.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Like, oh, man. That is unfortunate. He's got such heavy bags under his eyes, and he looks like just like he's sweating and pale, like he had some bad sushi or something. And like, it was a very funny moment in the commentary where they're like, and you did a great job. The effects department did a great job with the makeup on this guy. And Graham Whiffler's just like, no, that guy has no makeup on.
No, he showed up camera ready. He was good.
And we should mention there's some interesting character actors in this. Irwin Keyes, who most people probably remember the opening scene of House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yeah. We've covered before the Oblivion movies. Yeah. And they're like real. That's kind of one of the strange, incongruous things about this movie. It has real actors in it that you recognize. The lead actor here, this is the first performance ever by Jack Huston, who you would probably know from Boardwalk Empire.
Of the acting Houston, yeah.
Of the Hustons, yeah. He's the nephew of Angelica and Danny. So, I don't know how he broke into the industry, but somehow he was able to find some connections. But I don't mean to dig him. He's actually a very talented actor, as you'll see. Like he's got a steady career working this.
Also, you can't just call him a nepo baby because he is the nephew of Angelica and Danny Huston, but also making him the grandson of John Huston.
Exactly, and a great grandson of Walter Huston. Like the Hustons go all the way back.
Yeah.
The story that I got was one of the producers of this movie worked on a film called Milwaukee, Minnesota. And the director of that was friends with Angelica Huston, and through all those connections, it led to them meeting with Jack about. And one of the producers says that they gave him a box of chocolates with the script, and he was on board the next week.
That's pretty great. That's pretty good. It's cool that he would, he's a handsome young British actor, and you don't necessarily want to stake your reputation on the diarrhea movie as like your calling. You don't want your real. to be just a bunch of poop coming out of your butt, and that is what is happening to him a lot.
Yeah, we should mention there's quite a bit of excretion in this movie, so anyone who's sensitive to that is advised to maybe watch something else. And then Houston, he had the same manager as Pell James, who plays his new bride in the movie, who's really terrific. And hasn't really done a lot since then, I don't think, but she's really good in this, and she's the one who really goes through it by the end of the film.
She's like, if she looks familiar to anybody, it's because she features in what I think is the single best and most disturbing scene in Zodiac. She is the young lady who is like with her boyfriend and they're murdered in broad daylight next to a pond. That's a scene that just really, really gets under my skin and is so incredibly well done. And she's the girl in that.
The poor girl is depicted some of the worst stuff in these movies.
She really does, and she's got such like this very sweet face and very, very, very beautiful, very talented actress.
I think her performance in this movie is really good, but there's a moment in the movie. There were moments in the movie where every time it would cut back to her in the house, I was just like, "Oh fuck, what are they going to do to her now?"
I know. It really was one of those kind of movies. We also had some great cameos from the likes of. I'm sorry.
I just say your worst expectations get fulfilled. This is not one of these movies that sets you up and then backs down. I mean, however bad you think it can get, it gets worse.
Yeah, there is no brake pedal on this movie. It is go 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 from as soon as you see something gross, just expect to keep hitting that ramp until I can't even say it reaches its logical conclusion, but it surpasses the logical conclusion. But of course, the biggest name attached to this movie at the time, we've mentioned him already, is Nick Searcy, who is playing Adrian Trumbull. He was just kind of a steadily working character actor throughout the 90s. He was in like Days of Thunder and Prince of Tides and Nell, plays the sheriff in that. And yeah, like I said, I know him best from the movie Castaway. And in 2008, he would be cast as the Marshal on Justified, which is just one of those shows that's been sitting on my various streaming queues for like so long. I keep hearing it's fantastic, and I've just never gotten to it.
Really, really good.
I like everybody involved.
A show
in
that
it.
People don't talk about much anymore. It kind of had this thing where it was on and it was drawing viewers, but it was never in the same breath as a lot of the kind of, I guess, golden age shows that at the time that were also on at the same, all the prestige shows that were happening. So it kind of took a back seat to some of the ones, but it's a really fantastic show.
Yeah.
And Nick Searcy is, he's a big part of that show. He's but if you that to me really, I know there were a lot of people who were into The Shield and Sons of Anarchy, but to me, like, this is where, like, Justified is where Walton Goggins became Walton Goggins.
Very much so. Yeah. It's just worth mentioning here just because, he's put himself in the position for us to mention it. Nick Searcy is kind of a social media shithead. He's super far right. He really likes to kind of like race bait and poke some wounds at people. He was present at January 6th at the insurrection. He did not partake in the riots and wasn't charged at any point, but he was present there, and he is one of the people who is really loudly trying to recast that event as anything other than what it was. He's trying to reinterpret it as this sort of heroic act. So he's a dumbass. I just have to like go on the record of saying like Nick Searcy in real life is a dumbass.
Yeah, I remember finding that out and being disappointed.
He joins the ranks of like Mel Gibson and James Woods for me, of like fantastic actors who are just rancid human beings, which is it's like a real shame.
Yeah, like a Sorbo is an easier pill to swallow because you're like, that guy sucks professionally and personally.
I was not even disappointed. He fully was just reading the stage direction in that, right? Like, are we in agreement? There's no way that was a line of dialogue. He was just misreading the stage direction.
Yeah. So take nothing away from the performance in this movie, I think is a very commanding performance, and he's very good on Justified. I think, a lot of those proclivities have worsened, I'm sure, only in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that he is worse than Adrian, but,
I think different ways of going about it. That's all. He's not as subtle as Adrian is in what he gets up to.
Yeah. No, and I just felt it worth mentioning because I am going to be giving him some praise for this performance, which is fully committed, which is deeply unsettling. There's no winking in this movie. There is no, he's really embodying a truly repulsive human being, which as an actor, like no matter where you stand on political stuff or whatever, as an actor, that's a hard place to bring yourself. And so I can respect at least that he went as hard as he did and that he was a real champion for this movie and was he was really defending this performance and really kind of trying to get people to see this movie and discover it. Strangely, it's not listed in his Wikipedia. If you look at his filmography, it's just not in there. And I think it's probably
weird because he has rarely done a starring role. He's been a character actor, and this is one of the biggest, he is at the center of this movie, and it's one of where he is. So
yeah, it's a real showcase for him too. But it is a movie that is a hard sell. And I think that's what Graham Whiffler was sort of running into. After they got this movie made around 2005, they started taking it around to festivals, and they weren't picking up any distributors, but they were starting to build a reputation, at least in the nerdy little circles that the three of us run in. You would probably start hearing about this really disgusting underground movie coming out of Fantasia or whatever. And there were incidents of people vomiting at screenings. There were incidents of people fainting. And then of course, the aforementioned Stuart Gordon screening where somebody had a seizure. I'm sure that was, I don't know enough about seizures to know how they work, but that feels like that was a coincidence, that it happened during the screening at this time. But either way, it was a movie that provoked a physical reaction in an audience member. So you can absolutely see how that would appeal to Stuart Gordon coming out of the theater world that he came out of. He was really boundary pushing, and he really likes to kind of make the audience members sort of uncomfortable. And you could see why he would want to go to bat for this movie and why he would connect him to Charlie. As we mentioned, Lunatic releasing set up to only release this DVD, which finally did get a release in 2008. And it's now completely out of print. It doesn't stream anywhere. It's not on YouTube. I even tried to attain this movie through less legal means, and nobody is seeding any copies of this movie. So Jared and I are now proud owners of our own DVDs of this.
The sequence of events, which I did not expect, went as follows. I was like, all right, Deadly End. Let me look for it. Okay. Not finding it, or a Neighborhood Watch, not finding it on any streaming. All right, let me go to YouTube. Somebody probably has a rip of it on YouTube. Nope, can't find anything on YouTube. Telling Steve, all right, let's look around, see if we can find this anywhere. It's seeming like it's pretty difficult, but we've gotten people to send us files before when this happens. And it's like, let's see, but this one's looking like it's really hard to find. I reached out to you, Mike, and you were like, I have the disc. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I went on Amazon and I found the disc, and we were getting closer and closer, and we realized we were going to have to push back our recording. So I was like, you know what? Let me just buy it. I'll watch the DVD. I'll then say it was damaged, and I'll return it to Amazon.
You mean you don't want to keep it as a permanent part of your collection?
Well, the thing is, though, so Steve did the same. Steve bought the DVD too. We both had them. It's like, all right, great. Our recording is rescheduled for a couple weeks from now. It gives us some time. What I did not expect was to pop this thing in and be like, holy shit, this is actually good. Like this, I might actually keep this movie now, which was not my intention. And I was because again, it's so beige and it's so it looks so nondescript that I was just like, there has to be something to it, but there had to be a reason why it was picked. But there has to be, I know that. And then Mike, you sent us, the article you had written for Fangoria and your interview with Graham Waffle. And it's like, great. That's awesome. There's some subtext here, and here's some context. We can read about this now. We can get a little bit of background. And okay, so it was a movie you covered back then, but none of that really prepared me for exactly how engaged I was going to be in this movie. I was kind of expecting to pop it on and have it be middle of the road, early digital full moon. And I was even saying that I had thought that we had covered something where we talked before about Graham Whiffler, and we hadn't. It was
No.
what I was conflating was that the director of a movie we covered a couple of months ago called Demonicus
Oh yeah,
was
yeah.
a guy named Jay Wolfel.
That's
And
it.
I was confusing Graham Whiffler and Jay Wolfel. I was like, oh, I think we talked about this guy. And then I was looking into it a little bit more when I started watching the movie, and I was like, oh no, I was wrong. This is a person who knows how to make a movie.
And I think that kind of shines through, despite there are some very, very real craft issues with this movie. Like sound quality is all over the map, like the camera, the lighting and everything. They're very limited in what they can actually accomplish. But the fact that they were able to get this many like real actors who went on to have careers or had careers coming into this. We didn't mention Eileen Dietz as a cameo in this, the face of Pazuzu in The Exorcist, a couple other people like that. John Ennis, who plays his buddy. I'm a big Mr. Show fan, and he was one of the original casts of Mr. Show with Bob and Dave, one of the best sketch comedy shows ever made. So I spotted John Ennis and got real excited there. Yeah, and Erwin Keys we mentioned too. Yeah, so there's some real people in this, and like there's a vision behind it. I think there's a real, as icky as that vision might be, there is a very specific attitude and feeling and vibe that this movie is putting out there. And that's not always something you can do when you're on a minuscule budget and when you're crunched for time to kind of like get your locations out there. So it's very impressive that this feels so distinctly auteur driven. This feels like the bastard love child of David Lynch and John Waters. And that's a very weird vibe to hit without it being funny.
Well, I was so excited. I was excited actually watching it when I realized where it was going. And I mean, I enjoyed the fact that I didn't know where it was going for a lot of it, but just realizing this is the aesthetic and this is what they're going for here. And these are the players in this movie. It was kind of exciting for me because I just thought we didn't have anything like this really remaining in the show. Like, I didn't think that, to me, this was kind of a discovery of like, I didn't have the contextual background for it. So for me, I was kind of like, this movie is gross and nasty and I'm here for it. And I did not know really the story behind it until I started to read about it in preparation for the show. And so, Mike, you have, like, we're going back 20 years or so for a history with this movie. Like, and I know you wrote about it and stuff, but do you remember distinctly like the general vibe around this one in its festival run? I mean, it went into festivals, and was it one people talked about?
Oh yeah, it definitely had built up a reputation. And as you were saying at the time, well, actually, this movie was made, I guess, in 2005. I guess it was starting to come into festivals, and horror had really kind of come back. I can't recall exactly where it fit in with the kind of Saw Hostel, like when horror started getting more extreme again. But yeah, this definitely had a rep going into festivals. But it was one of those things where the very thing that made it talked about at festivals made it something distributors would look at and be like, yeah, I don't think we're going to take this. I don't know how we can market this. I don't know how we can get this out to a wide audience. And talking about it in context of Full Moon almost exclusively released homemade projects. It was very rare they picked up a completed movie, I believe, and released it. So that makes it an outlier there. It was not something that Charlie developed or that one of the filmmakers involved developed and made, under Charlie's auspices.
Yeah.
This completed movie that, Stuart Gordon recommended and he picked up and put out. So that's one reason it's such an outlier in the whole Full Moon catalog, is it was not generated out of Charlie's mind or out of the minds of one of his regular filmmakers.
And so you could see, Charlie being the consummate exploitation filmmaker, you could see him wanting to jump on the trend of, at this time it would have been torture porn, Saw, like those movies were starting to come into prominence. So yeah, we are entering this era where there is a little bit more gore coming back into our horror movies, and now we've reached a phase where that's kind of at a fever pitch with like the Terrifier movies, and every new like big horror movie is like an arms race to be like as gross as possible. But this movie, it wasn't so much the blood and guts that upset me, but just the invasiveness of everything that he's doing, like poisoning somebody's chocolates visually. Okay, like that's not going to be like as that's not going to be like a Tom Savini effect or something. That's not going to be like a memorable gore moment. But even before we start visualizing some of this excrement, like everybody knows what that feeling is like, and everybody can like immediately put themselves into how horrible that is. Or you can think about, oh my God, what if this were to happen to me like when I'm not new at my job, like what if this were to happen to me in a social situation, like I'm out at the grocery store. Like we all know that feeling and that visceral kind of terror, and it's something that a lot of horror filmmakers stay away from.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not so much the big gore splatter effect, but there's definitely, in hearing the special effects department and makeup department and Graham Whiffler himself talk about it, when it came to, like placing the poop on the floor, they were very more, add more, we need more.
It's a risky thing to do because poop in movies, that weird thing that I never thought I would get to talk about on this show, but the history of cinematic pooping, it's almost entirely comedic, right? Like it kind of has to be at this point. Like poop is funny. It's a funny word. It's a funny thing. Like, and everybody does it. It's a humanizing moment. So very few serious like horror filmmakers use poop as a horror device because it could backfire, right? It can make your movie look silly.
It can. You have to make the decision then that you are going to play with a semi-comedic tone, because there's like the scene where Wendy is having her like first bout of poisoning, and then it cuts to Jack. Why am I blanking on Jack Houston's character's name?
Bob.
But
yeah,
Bob. It cuts to Bob at work eating the world's largest cup of pudding.
Exactly. Yeah, really good. Like there's some gallows humor kind of stuff, and I think this movie, it's not intended to be a comedy, but I think it is being made with a kind of mischievous spirit. Like it is trying to unsettle us, and it is trying to be gross, but it's also kind of reveling in how much it's getting away with.
There's definitely the sense of him, like he is playing it for about the first half or an hour of the movie. It's almost kind of a certain black humor, because again, poop is usually used in movies for comedic effect, and here it is not. But even so, you're still looking at some of these scenes and you're grossed out, but there's also something kind of very darkly amusing about it. And by the way, I just want to point out, the next movie Stuart Gordon made after this movie was a movie called, or after he saw this movie, was a movie called Stuck.
Yeah,
in that movie, Mina Suvari plays a woman who works in a retirement home. And in the movie, as I recall, Stuart Gordon's directing credit appears over a shot of a poop-filled diaper on an old person in their retirement home. So
yeah.
I'd have to check that to be sure, but I think Stuart Gordon might have gotten a touch of inspiration from watching the film.
I mean, it's that's just kind of the first onslaught. And there's a whole huge like middle chunk of this movie where it's a lot of like shit and vomit. Like, and so if that's something that you're uncomfortable seeing, like this is going to be a rough section of movie. And we're getting, Adrian is like starting to get more and more aggressive. He's starting to like break into their house. Like Bob catches him in front of his fridge with like a lunchbox full of poisons, like altering his food. And I think I might have missed something or glazed over it or something. Why didn't they arrest him? They called the cops on Adrian. The cops show up and then they refuse to take him and like scold Bob and Wendy for calling the cops on him.
If I'm not mistaken, they say that Adrian is like the son of a prominent figure in the town. He has some kind of connection to like the town government. So then they're just kind of like, oh yeah, he's harmless. And I think that's what it is. They're like, it's because he has like and this is a motif that always gets me. As somebody who grew up in a city, who's always been a little bit suspicious of small towns, like this movie just affirmed what I always thought, which is that everyone in a small town secretly wants to kill you.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
There's always some like Stepford Wives, Disturbia, like, Rear Window type, although Rear Window is obviously New York City, but like there's always like some malevolent force where the people are all in on something, and anytime there's like a community of people that like are banding together as like an external threat, that's always really effective to me.
Yeah.
And it really feels, and it feels magnified with this character of Wendy, because again, I think Pell James is very good in this movie.
Yeah.
But I want to know something. So is it sort of like it's supposed to be implied that she's some kind of like manic depressive or agoraphobic, right?
Yeah.
Because
he definitely has some kind of issue. And I also just, before we go on, I want to point out that's what the original title Neighborhood Watch speaks to.
Yeah.
Is what you're just saying, is the idea that you are new in a neighborhood and everybody else is kind of, they already have their alliances and their group, and they're going to like watch you, and you know, you're the outsider and they're all going to be kind of against you from the beginning. So that's another reason I don't think they should have changed that title.
And I mean, there's literally a scene where they form a neighborhood watch where they, you know, call out the name of the movie, you know, and the brilliant part of this is that like Adrian is clearly the most fucked up person on the street. But like you alluded to earlier, Jared, like everybody in this little cul-de-sac is kind of twisted. Like we early on, we get like an old lady who crashes her car into their garbage cans, and then her husband comes over to pick her up, and both of them can just like chitter, like they can't form words anymore. They just kind of like holler and like wave at each other, like, and it's clear that they're trying to communicate something and have lost some kind of capacity. So they're the initial like unnerving element, but ultimately they're kind of the harbingers. They're the ones who are trying to like, they're trying to warn this new couple about this crazy guy who lives here, but they don't have the words for it anymore. And I was assuming that it was because they've been tormented by this guy for years. You know, they've been, whatever reason they can't speak or don't have their faculties about them anymore, is because of his actions.
Yeah, so, I think it's definitely presented that way. I think you could 100% read that into it. I think the movie telegraphs that a little bit. But I mean, all of these side characters are so, they're so Lynchian and John Watersy at the same time, like you said before. Like, I was thinking about the old couple who are sitting in the taxi cabs, staring and smiling in Mulholland Drive.
I had that exact image. That and and them like skittering around and crawling into the puzzle box like towards the end of the movie. Like that's what I was thinking of with these characters. And then we get to see the other neighbors who are like a little further down the street, like during the neighborhood watch scene, and every one of them are elderly and agitated and have sores all over their mouths and faces. Like they are covered in these welts and blisters, just like everybody. And it's not clear if it's Adrian doing that, or it's like maybe the madness is stemming from some kind of like pollutant in the water or in the nuclear fallout or something coming off of nearby. Like there's clearly a reason why this neighborhood is so affordable, and why they all just seem like a little manic and a little diseased.
Well, you do wonder how much time the couple spent, you know, in this town looking at this house before they moved in. It's like, did they not see any of these weird people in the neighborhood when they came to the open house? Or
right? Yeah. How did you avoid all this?
I think the house, I think it's implied or said at some point that the house was sort of like given to Bob by the Z-Corp Corporation. As part of his move. And I just felt like with Wendy's character, it would have been interesting to learn a little bit more, because, you know, she's often the recipient of a lot of the heinous behavior, but she's also like, you know, when she gets frightened by something, she hides in a box like a cat. And then she makes cat sounds when they're having foreplay together, which Adrian then gets to use against them later on. But and then she hides under blankets in the corner, and she's always like not really unpacking, half painting the walls occasionally, like not really, you know, it's kind of like, I don't know. I was wanting to dig into, because I do feel like for this level budget movie and what we're getting here, it is a pretty like nuanced performance in some ways. And I just wish that there was a little more to that, to how like this stuff is speaking to what she already knows are these outside threats. It doesn't really seem like that when they are introduced. She does seem a little kinky and a little rough in the beginning. And then it's like, well, they are a newlywed seeming couple. And then she seems kind of well adjusted initially, and then it kind of all goes to shit really fast. And I found the poison oak makeup to be very disturbing.
Yeah, really effective. They put their money in the right places here. Like I was griping about the sound quality and some of the like the visual quality, but they emphasized the gore, they emphasized the makeup, and they emphasized the actors. And I think that was kind of the right way to distribute it. You know, up to this point, we've been seeing Adrian kind of tormenting this couple, and we don't really fully know his full motives. And we come to learn his motives are rooted in this deep sexual shame, which culminates in one of the single creepiest and most unsettling scenes I've ever seen in a movie. Again, content warning right here because of what I'm about to describe. But there is a scene where we learn that Nick Cersei's character likes to operate on himself. And he has cut a big hole in his abdomen. And so he is taking an audio recording that he stole of his neighbors having sex, playing it while fingering his stomach wound and stabbing himself in the crotch with a syringe.
Yeah.
This is a long scene. We really have to sit in it. And I was just dumbstruck by what I was seeing.
I'm not someone who typically has to look away from a screen or has to cover their eyes. And this actually, that got that reaction from me where I actually, I did one of those side eyes. Like I looked to the side and I was like, if this doesn't cut soon, I'm going to look away. But it was very effective in that way. And we talked about the character's introduction, which was him laying in the same position, eating, picking scabs from his body and eating them from this same sort of like kind of area where there's this open wound, and him fingering this wound and then stabbing himself with the syringe in the genitals while it's cutting back to this like very conventionally attractive couple having sex to then the most horrific looking thing you could possibly imagine. Was really effective.
Well, a word about the makeup effects. They were done by a guy named Lenny McDonald, who was part of Steve Johnson's team. And Steve Johnson was one of the big makeup effects in the 90s. And the way that happened was they had contacted Steve Johnson about possibly doing the effects. And at the time, they were going to do all the makeup effects on the first Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah.
Or the first big one. And then they got underbid by another company at the last minute. And Johnson called the filmmakers and said, look, one of my key right-hand guys now doesn't have a job. So if that movie is still going, he'd be your guy for it. And so Lenny McDonald got on the movie and they went through like medical books and came up with all this horrible stuff.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's not one of those movies where you're like marveling at how realistic the gore looks or anything like that. Like you see the seams and you understand that what you're seeing, but the thing that gets under your skin is just the thought process that created this and and just the fact that we're seeing this acting out and we're seeing this like truly sick mind that is enacting these things, and we're like, oh man, this character is on a level that we haven't really been prepared for. Like he is so much more worse than we had anticipated, and that he's worse than most movie villains in terms of how sick he is.
Well, people talked, about movies like Last House on the Left and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they say one of the scary things is realizing you are in the hands of a director who's a complete madman.
Yeah.
And that's what happens here, I think, in a way. It's like you're not just freaking out over what you're watching. You're like, there's a person out there created this and thought this stuff up. And that's kind of disturbing on its own.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Graham Whiffler has not made a movie since this.
I don't believe so. I'm not exactly sure what happened to him since. He's one of these guys who just kind of existed on the fringes, and he did Sonny Boy, and it's interesting. We were talking about his experiences in Hollywood. Sonny Boy was a completely independent film.
Yeah,
done by the people who made like Curse 2: The Bite and things like that, and it was released by Transworld Entertainment, who released Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yeah.
And, it just shows you, even on the independent scene, they can take a look at this script and say, we can't do this as extreme as you've written it, even as extreme as it is. And yeah, he's one of those guys who's just so offbeat that it's not a match for the forces that are actually responsible for making movies.
He to say that he does not have mainstream sensibilities is an understatement. You could see how he's not a guy who's like destined to kind of rise up the studio system necessarily. He's got a singular kind of energy, and it sounds like it was really well utilized by bands like The Residents, which really favor experimentation and kind of letting that freaky stuff go. There's a real anger at the center of this movie. There's a real there's just a really disturbing and nihilistic vision at the center of it, while also like I recognize that this is a jet black comedy and that it is, it's not a ha-ha comedy, but it is like a really, really dark satire of suburban life, of corporate life, of these kind of religious oppression and how it can like kind of warp our brain. Like there's a lot of things going on in this movie. This all culminates in a final 30-minute act that's basically just a nonstop assault on your senses. It is, Bob is blinded by some of the poisons that's put on him. And then Wendy is kidnapped and he rips the unborn baby out of her stomach and like just leaves her guts open. She wakes up in the middle of surgery and he starts screaming at her. And then he decides to operate on himself. And he decides to start pulling out organs and he's digging around in there. And then the agitated elderly neighbor whose wife finally passed away.
Let's not give it all away here. I mean, we want
that's
people,
true.
If you can possibly.
You know what's funny? Normally we don't run into this problem where it's kind of like we'll say like, here's what's happening in this thing. And it's like a lot of people listening to the show are hardcore Full Moon fans and are interested in our takes on the movie, but have established relationships. I think you're right, Mike. For this one, this might be one that a lot of people are not aware of.
Yeah.
And especially as just a pickup of a completed movie that we're covering here. I would say, actually, this is one of those rare times where maybe we don't spoil all of the aspects of it. Usually it's not really a problem. Usually we're either working with something that's been well documented, like a Reanimator, where we're having conversations about the behind the scenes more than we are the plot. And then, or it's just like, we're kind of apathetic towards, or at least sharing in the apathetic nature of like some of the stuff we're covering. We're just like, yeah, so this happens and no one cares. But for this one, I think you're right. Like, I think there is, again, I'll circle back to this word again of human depravity on display in this movie, that if you're hearing us talk about this movie and you're like, this movie sounds crazy, I've never heard of it. Like, actually, yeah, like, I'm wholeheartedly recommending this. I think if you're listening to the show and you've never seen this, it'd be hard to find. Get yourself an out of print DVD is the only really way to watch it now. But totally, like there is some stuff. There are some specifics. I will say there's in keeping with the kind of jet black tone of the movie, there is a hilarious moment earlier when Adrian leaves the neighborhood watch meeting and just like kicks the woman's machine unplugged and then walks out of the room, which I thought, I couldn't help but chuckle at that. It was just such a like perfectly like this guy would do that. Like he just doesn't give a fuck, which is great.
He's a pathetic bully on top of being like a terrifying monster. Like he's just unpleasant in every way a human being can be unpleasant, and it's a dynamite performance. I'm recommending this too, with about 30 pages of small print. Just please just listen to us when we say that this is a movie for when you want to push your boundaries a little bit. And I think every horror fan, every film fan has that phase. I'm sure we all rented Salò or the 120 Days of Sodom and just like, or picked up Faces of Death, in a brown paper bag. Like this is a brown paper bagger. This fully is.
This is Adrian Portrait of a Serial Killer.
It is exactly that. Yeah.
And I would add that like I'm usually not a fan of like filth as an aesthetic. Like,
nor am I.
I'm not into movies that it's like they're showing a bunch of shit or rotting food or something just to get a rise out of people. I mean, this is a genuinely good, well-made, well-acted, disturbing movie. It just does really go there, and you have to you have to prepare your stomach for it before you watch it.
You have to judge every movie by how effective it is at what it's trying to do. And this is a movie that is trying to make you sick and uncomfortable and grossed out and unsettled. And this is incredibly successful at doing all of those things.
I was shocked. I was shocked. I was genuinely shocked. I was looking at like the pull quotes on the front of the DVD, like the most profoundly disturbing imagery ever featured on film, disturbing and scary tale of suburbia gone mad. And in my head, I'm thinking like, no one ever would pull that kind of quote for a review of a full moon movie.
Yeah.
Like it's just because one, they're barely were professionally reviewed, but also like it just, and all of those components of like you suggesting the movie and then getting the DVD and being like, okay, there's actually like, this is an interesting premise and there's these pull quotes on it. I'm really curious what we're going to get here. And it really like it kind of blew away my expectations with exactly how effective it was going to be.
If it gives you any idea of where it's at, I put up an Instagram story promoting that this episode was coming out this week. And friend of the show, Kelly from Taboo Terrors podcast, reached out and said, "Ooh, I am interested in this." So if you know anything about Kelly and her interests, the fact that this would pique those interests, we should tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, and again, I'm just hoping maybe someone out there who's listening to this podcast is in a position to get this movie back out there and get it onto Blu-ray so more people can see it.
I think there's more of a market for this movie now than there was in 2005 and certainly in 1995. Like, I think there's more of an appetite for these kind of things. Like, we are in a world now where Faces of Death has been remade and released in 2,000 theaters, you know, like it's a different take on it, obviously, but like there's a zeitgeisty thing going on of young film fans trying to push their boundaries a little bit. And this is a real, this gets you obscurity cred too, because you really have to dig around to find this one. This is something only the real ones know about.
Yeah, it's just surprising to me that that you can't find it on YouTube and that it is so hard to find, because again, it was put out under the auspices of Full Moon anyway, and you can find almost every other Full Moon movie out there somewhere. And this one, you know, I guess they had it for however long they licensed it, and then they let it get away, and now it's out there in the ether somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, 100%. Super, super glad that you chose this, and was not really expecting the movie that we got. And this one was, we're always happy on the show where we come across a surprise. Now, this is obviously a different type of movie than some of the other ones that we covered. But every once in a while, there'll be a movie we came in with no real expectation, and we're maybe not blown away by, but we're pleasantly surprised by. And this falls into that category.
Absolutely. And as always, we have to thank Michael Gingold for coming on the show and for helping us find these amazing little nuggets that are out there. Like, even with it was buried within our own spreadsheet, and I never would have known exactly what we had if you hadn't helped us unearth this. So thank you so much for coming back on the show. We always love having you on. Where can people find your stuff, your writing? You're as prolific as ever right now.
Yeah, well, I write regularly for Rue Morgue Online. I write for every issue of Fangoria. I have a few books out. My book Ad Nauseum, which is a collection of newspaper ads for 70s and 80s horror films, just came out in paperback. And right now I'm working on a documentary called Slasher Trash with the producers, from the producers of In Search of Darkness, which is all 80s slashers outside of the big franchises. Like, it's not Freddy, Jason, Michael. It's things like Prom Night and My Bloody Valentine and Graduation Day and things like that. So that's going to be a really fun one. We're hoping to have that out in October. So
hell yes.
Yeah, I'm excited. I kickstarted that one, so I can't wait to get my physical and digital copies.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on. And thanks for giving Deadly and/or Neighborhood Watch a forum, because so few people, it got talked about a little bit back at the time, but lately it's just kind of fallen through the cracks, I think. And I hope more people kind of discover it and it gets a new life out there.
And yeah, listeners 100%. Out there who are looking to distribute a movie, it sounds like the the rights are maybe not up for grabs, but they're in a kind of an ephemeral state. So if you want to dig into it, maybe we can get something going. It'd be interesting to see this get a little revival. But
and an original title too.
Restore that title. Yeah.
Yeah. In the meantime, if you're not a film distributor, try and snatch up the Deadly End DVD while you can. You can get it from secondhand retailers. I would say check it out. And if you're a fan of the things we cover on the show, you're going to like this one. You really are. It's going to be a pleasant surprise, I think. If you like what we do every single week on the show, the best way to show us is by leaving us a 5-star rating, maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you're listening. We are on Instagram at puppetmasters_Castle Freaks. You can also follow me at _Giallo_Jared. And we do day of releasing stuff on our Facebook group, on Threads and Blue Sky and things like that. So you know where to find us if you want to keep up with what we're doing. We did have some video for our Anita Rosenberg interview with director of Assault of the Killer Bimbos, talking about the making of that movie, which was super fun. So maybe there'll be some more video in the mix later on, but it's hard because it takes a lot of work. And Steve is also a very prolific, very busy boy. So Steve, what else have you got going on?
Well, I'm also the host of the show Cinema Arcade. That's cinema and arcade mashed together. Each week we are watching a movie and playing a video game based on that movie. And this week, the episode you're going to be hearing is going to be about the Austin Powers franchise. So if you ever watched that movie and thought to yourself, man, I really wish I knew what Austin Powers' desktop computer screen looked like. Well, do I have the Game Boy game for you? Deeply strange film. I also just love that I've created a little niche for myself where if people want to hear me talk about something, on the same day, you could hear me talk about Austin Powers and Deadly End. So you can do that if you want. If you want to back-to-back those, if you want to have a little Barbenheimer of that, you're welcome to. And next week, you're going to definitely want to tune in to us because we are going to be back talking about a 2023 movie by the great Jim Wynorski, which he's depicting a killer robot. That's right. We're talking about the movie Murderbot. And for those who got excited when I said Jim Wynorski and Killer Robot, don't worry. This is also going to be a secret Chopping Mall episode. We figured, why not? Yeah, it has very little to do with what we're talking about here, but we both love that movie. This is as good an opportunity as we'll ever get to talk about it. And that's exactly what we did. So tune in next week for a double feature of Murderbot and Chopping Mall.
Listen, Murderbot's like 46 minutes long, and
not a meaty 46 minutes. There's not a whole lot to talk about with Murderbot.
We had to fill some space on that one, but it gave us an opportunity to talk about a movie we like and talk about some actors who we just enjoy, being able to talk about on the show. So definitely join us next week for Murderbot and Chopping Mall. And if you haven't taken away from it enough yet in this episode, go out there and get your hands on a DVD of Deadly End. Do it.